Now, let's do a little something for a short story, shall we? Let's go to the fiction world and talk about Fiction Friday for y'all. A little something extra special for you. Tonight, I'm going to give you an option. You let me know which one you would prefer. We're going to go with the Outer Limits, Control Voice, and former Star Trek writing fellow. Remember the channel if you can suggest it to people. That would be great.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
All right, the Outer Limits. Thank you, Outer Limits Control Voice, and thank you, StreamYard, for responding. Now, let's get to the options. So you get to vote, everybody, and we'll see if we can count up the votes here. I've got a few options, one of which might lend itself towards a little bit more curiosity because the name is fairly well known, but I'll give you the lowdown here, okay? First, we could read a short story by Roald Dahl, one of his adult short stories that is a suspense story that is inside this anthology, which features stories by Ruth Rendell, Roald Dahl, and many, many others. It's called Murder by the Glass. Okay, so there's that. And this Roald Dahl story, of course, Roald Dahl, of course, born in 1916, a year before my father, died in 1990. And as you can see, other family members are writers like Sophie Dahl, great writer of Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Great Glass Elevator, and so many others. The Fantastic Mr. Fox, The Witches, and so many wonderful ones. He also wrote the screenplay for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which was based on the Ian Fleming story. And so this is a story called A Connoisseur's Revenge, from Murder by the Glass, A Connoisseur's Revenge. Just to let you know, this story is 13 pages long. The print is fairly small print. I'd say it's probably 10-point font. Okay, Murder by A Connoisseur's Revenge from the book Murder by the Glass. Okay, now another story, and we have a bunch of different stories we could read here from the book that I've used before, To Sleep, Perchance to Dream, Nightmare, 30 Terrifying Tales, edited by Robert Weinberg and Martin H. Greenberg and Stefan Demisnowitz. Now, this features stories by people such as Ambrose Bierce, Robert W. Chambers, A. Merritt, Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, Hugh B. Cave, C. L. Moore, Wilkie Collins, J. Ferridan LaFanu. Wow. And we read A Dream of Red Hands by Bram Stoker. Remember that one? So we could read from this one a story by E.F. Benson called The Room in the Tower. And remember, E.F. Benson is the brother of Robert Hugh Benson. They were the sons, along with their other brother, of the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the Anglican Church, and Robert Hugh Benson left the Anglican Church in the 1900s and became a Catholic priest and wrote The Lord of the World, which is a dystopian novel that ranks up there with 1984. So we could read the story The Room in the Tower by E.F. Benson, which is 11 pages long, and it looks like it's 10-point font as well. Okay, so again, The Room in the Tower by E.F. Benson, which is a legendary story, by the way, if you've never heard it. That one I've read before, but I have not read this one, A Connoisseur's Revenge by Roald Dahl, which again is 13 pages on 10-point font. And then finally, there is, let's see, this one here. We could read, let me just double check here. This one by Miriam Allen DeFord called Time Trammel. Miriam Allen DeFord, Time Trammel, which is even shorter, 6 pages at 10-point font. From this book, 8 Doors to Death, edited by Hans Stefan Sentenson. Again, I want to remind you, in case you want to vote, this is Time Trammel. This book originally published in, let me see, Time Trammel was published originally in 1956 in fantasy and science fiction. Time Trammel. Very cool. By Miriam Allen Ford. So, you let me know what you would like read. And then next week, perhaps we'll talk a little bit about Roald Dahl. But you put in your votes and we'll check it out. Fiction Friday, says Jason. I like it. I vote for Room in the Tower, says Muhosky. Dun, 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 says Hero May. I vote the first one already. Is that the Roald Dahl one? Jason, just let me know. I want my palm read. Roald Dahl, says Hero May. Okay, so it looks like we have 2 for Roald Dahl. And I think it's 2 for Roald Dahl. I'm not sure. Let me just see if I've missed anything. And Ferb says, last concert I saw was at Great Woods was the Allman Brothers Band. All right. Okay, well, I tell you what, let's go with Roald Dahl and see what happens. Now, Roald Dahl's the Roald Dahl story is, you know what? Wait, before I do anything, let's go with this super short one, and then maybe we'll do. Jason says Roald Dahl. Okay, we'll try Roald Dahl. Here we go, everybody. Now I'm going to make myself small again and put up the close down a lot of tabs so we don't spend a lot of energy on the tabs. And then we'll put up Fantastic Fiction with Roald Dahl in the image there. Roald Dahl, very tall man. They said he was a very handsome man. So there you go. All right. Here it is, everybody. Roald Dahl from the book Murder by the Glass, a collection, an anthology edited by Peter Haining, who did a lot of anthologies, came out in 1994. And this is a story called A Connoisseur's Revenge by Roald Dahl. All right. There were 6 of us to dinner that night at Mike Schofield's house in London. Mike and his wife and daughter, my wife and I, and a man called Richard Pratt. Richard Pratt was a famous gourmet. He was president of a small society known as the Epicures, and each month he circulated privately to his members a pamphlet on food and wines. He organized dinners that were sumptuous, where sumptuous dishes and rare wines were served. He refused to smoke for fear of harming his palate, and when discussing a wine, he had a curious, rather droll habit of referring to it as though it were a living being. A prudent wine, he would say, rather diffident and evasive, but that was quite prudent. Or a good-humored wine, benevolent and cheerful, slightly obscene perhaps, but nonetheless good-humored. I had been to dinner at Mike's twice before when Richard Pratt was there, and on each occasion Mike and his wife had gone out of their way to produce a special meal for the famous gourmet, and this one clearly was to be no exception. The moment we entered the dining room, I could see that the table was laid for a feast. the tall candles, the yellow roses, the quantity of shining silver, the 3 wine glasses to each person, and above all, the faint scent of roasting meat from the kitchen brought the first warm oozings of saliva to my mouth. As we sat down, I remembered that on both Richard Pratt's previous visits, Mike had played a little betting game with him over the claret, challenging him to name its breed and its vintage. Pratt had replied that should not be too difficult, provided it was one of the great years. Mike had then bet him a case of the wine in question that he could not do it. Pratt had accepted and had won both times. Tonight I felt sure that the little game would be played over again, for Mike was quite willing to lose the bet in order to prove that his wine was good enough to be recognized, and Pratt, for his part, seemed to take a grave, restrained pleasure in displaying his knowledge. The meal began with a plate of whitebait, fried very crisp in butter, and to go with it there was a Moselle. Mike got up and poured the wine himself, and when he sat down again, I could see that he was watching Richard Pratt. He had set the bottle in front of me so that I could read the label. It said, Gerstley Olisberg, 1945. He leaned over and whispered to me that Gerstley was a tiny village in the Moselle, almost unknown outside Germany. He said that this wine we were drinking was something unusual, that the output of the vineyard was so small that it was almost impossible for a stranger to get any of it. He had visited Gerstley personally the previous summer in order to obtain the few dozen bottles that they had finally allowed him to have. I doubt anyone else in the country has any of it at the moment, he said. I saw him glance at Richard Pratt. Great thing about Moselle, he continued, raising his voice, is the perfect wine to serve. It is the perfect wine to serve before a claret. A lot of people serve a Rhine wine instead, but that's because they don't know any better. A Rhine wine will kill a delicate claret. You know that? It's barbaric to serve a Rhine before a claret. But, Moselle? A Moselle is exactly right. Mike Schofield was an amiable, middle-aged man, but he was a stockbroker. To be precise, he was a jobber in the stock market, and like a number of his kind, he seemed to be somewhat embarrassed, almost ashamed, to find that he had made so much money with so slight a talent. In his heart, he knew that he was not really much more than a bookmaker, an unctuous, infinitely respectable, secretly unscrupulous bookmaker. And he knew that his friends knew this too. So he was seeking now to become a man of culture, to cultivate a literary and aesthetic taste, to collect paintings, music, books, and all the rest of it. His little sermon about Rhine wine and Moselle was a part of this thing, this culture that he sought. A charming little wine, don't you think? He said. He was still watching Richard Pratt. I could see him give a rapid, furtive glance down the table each time he dropped his head to take a mouthful of whitebait. I could almost feel him waiting for the moment when Pratt would take his first sip and look up from his glass with a smile of pleasure, of astonishment, perhaps even of wonder. And then there would be a discussion, and Mike would tell him about the village of Gerstley. But Richard Pratt did not taste his wine. He was completely engrossed in conversation with Mike's 18-year-old daughter, Louise. He was half turned towards her, smiling at her, telling her, so far as I could gather, some story about a chef in a Paris restaurant. As he spoke, he leaned closer and closer to her, seeming in his eagerness almost to impinge upon her, and the poor girl leaned as far as she could away from him, nodding politely, rather desperately, and looking not at his face, but at the topmost button of his dinner jacket. Well, we finished our fish, and the maid came round removing the plates. When she came to Pratt, she saw that he had not yet touched his food. So she hesitated, and Pratt noticed her. He waved her away, broke off his conversation, and quickly began to eat, popping the little crisp brown fish quickly into his mouth with rapid jabbing movements of his fork. Then, when he had finished, he reached for his glass, and in 2 short swallows, he tipped the wine down his throat and turned immediately to resume his conversation with Louise Schofield. Mike saw it all. I was conscious of him sitting there very still, containing himself, looking at his guest. His round, jovial face seemed to loosen slightly and to sag, but he contained himself and was still and said nothing. Soon the maid came forward with the second course. This was a large roast of beef. She placed it on the table in front of Mike, who stood up and carved it, cutting the slices very thin, laying them gently on the plates for the maid to take round. When he had served everyone, including himself, he put down the carving knife and leaned forward with both hands on the edge of the table. "Now," he said, speaking to all of us, but looking at Richard Pratt, "now for the claret. I must go and fetch the claret, if you'll excuse me." "You go and fetch it, Mike," I said. But where is it?" "In my study, with the cork out, breathing." "Why the study?" "Acquiring room temperature, of course. It's been there 24 hours. "But why the study?" "It's the best place in the house. Richard helped me choose it last time he was there." At the sound of his name, Pratt looked round. "That's right, isn't it?" Mike said to him. "Oh, yes," Pratt answered, nodding gravely. "That's right." "On top of the green filing cabinet in my study," Mike said. "That's the place we chose. A good drop-free spot in a room with an even temperature. So excuse me now, will you, while I fetch the claret." The thought of another wine to play with had restored his humor, and he hurried out the door to return a minute later, more slowly, walking softly, holding in both hands a wine basket in which a dark bottle lay. The label was out of sight, facing downward. "Now," he cried as he came towards the table, "what about this one, Richard?" "You'll never name this one." Richard Pratt turned slowly and looked up at Mike. Then his eyes traveled down to the bottle, nestling in the small wicker basket, and he raised his eyebrows, a slight supercilious arching of the brows, and with it a pushing outward of the wet lower lip, suddenly becoming very imperious and ugly. "You'll never get it," Mike said. "Not in 100 years. Claret?" Richard Pratt asked, condescending. "Of course. I assume, then, that it's from one of the smaller vineyards." "Maybe it is, Richard. And then again, maybe it isn't. But it's a good year. One of the great years? Oh, yes, I guarantee that." "Then it shouldn't be too difficult," Richard Pratt said, drawling his words, looking exceedingly bored, except that, to me, there was something strange about his drawling and his boredom. Between the eyes, a shadow of something evil, and in his bearing, an intentness that gave me a faint sense of unease as I watched him. "This one is really rather difficult," Mike said. "I won't force you to bet on this one." "Indeed? Then why not?" Again the slow arching of the brows, the cool, intent look. "Because it's difficult." "That's not very complimentary to me, you know." "Oh, my dear man," Mike said, "I'll bet you with pleasure, if that's what you wish. It shouldn't be too hard to name it. You mean you want to bet? I'm perfectly willing to bet, Richard Pratt said. All right, then. We'll have the usual, a case of the wine itself. I don't think I'll be able to, you don't think I'll be able to name it, do you? As a matter of fact, and with all due respect, I don't, Mike said. He was making some effort to remain polite, but Pratt was not bothering overmuch to conceal his contempt for the whole proceeding. And yet, curiously, the next question seemed to betray a certain interest. You like to increase the bet? No, Richard, a case is plenty. Would you like to bet 50 cases? Oh, that would be silly. Mike stood very still behind his chair at the head of the table, carefully holding the bottle in its ridiculous wicker basket. There was a trace of whiteness around his nostrils now, and his mouth was shut very tight. Pratt was lolling back in his chair, looking up at him, the eyebrows raised, the eyes half closed, a little smile touching the corners of his lips. And again I saw, or thought I saw, something distinctly disturbing about the man's face, that shadow of intentedness between the eyes, and in the eyes themselves, right in their centers, where it was black, a small, slow spark of shrewdness seemed to be hiding. So, you don't want to increase the bet? As far as I'm concerned, old man, I don't give a damn, Mike said. I'll bet you anything you like. The three women and I sat quietly, watching the two men. Mike's wife was becoming annoyed. Her mouth had gone sour, and I felt that at any moment she was going to interrupt. Our roast beef lay before us on our plates, slowly steaming. So you'll bet me anything I like. That's what I told you. I'll bet you anything you damn well please, if you want to make an issue out of it. Even 10,000 pounds? Certainly I will, if that's the way you want it. Mike was more confident now. He knew quite well that he could call any sum Pratt cared to mention. So you say I can name the bet? Pratt asked again. That's what I said. There was a pause while Pratt looked slowly round the table, first at me, then at the three women, each in turn. He appeared to be reminding us that we were witnesses to this offer. Mike, Mrs. Schofield said, Mike, why don't we stop this nonsense and eat our food? It's getting cold. But it isn't nonsense, Pratt told her evenly. We're making a little bet. I noticed the maid, standing in the background holding a dish of vegetables, wondering whether to come forward with them or not. All right then, Pratt said. I'll tell you what I want to bet. Come on then, Mike said, rather reckless. I don't give a damn what it is. You're on. Pratt nodded. And again the little smile moved the corners of his lips. And then, quite slowly, looking at Mike all the time, he said, I want you to bet me the hand of your daughter in marriage. Louise Schofield gave a jump. Hey, she cried, no, that's not funny. Look here, Daddy, that's not funny at all. No, dear, her mother said, they're only joking. I'm not joking, Richard Pratt said. It's ridiculous, Mike said. He was off balance again now. You said you'd bet anything I liked. I meant money. You didn't say money. That's what I meant. Then it's a pity you didn't say it. But anyway, if you wish to go back on your order, that's quite all right with me. But anyway, if you wish to go back on your offer, that's quite all right with me. It's not a question of going back on my offer, old man. It's a no bet anyway, because you can't match the stake. You yourself don't happen to have a daughter to put up against mine in case you lose, and if you had, I wouldn't want to marry her. I'm glad of that. I'm glad of that, dear, his wife said. I'll put up anything you like, Pratt announced. My house, for example. How about my house? Which one? Mike asked, joking now. The country one. Why not offer the other one as well? All right, then, if you wish it. Both my houses. At that point, I saw Mike pause. He took a step forward and placed the bottle in its basket gently down on the table. He moved the salt cellar to one side, then the pepper, and then he picked up his knife, studied the blade thoughtfully for a moment, and put it down again. His daughter, too, had seen him pause. Now, Daddy, she cried, don't be absurd. It's too silly for words. I refuse to be betted on like this. Quite right, dear, her mother said. Stop it at once, Mike, and sit down and eat your food. Mike ignored her. He looked over at his daughter and he smiled, a slow, fatherly, protective smile. But in his eyes, suddenly there glimmered a little triumph. You know, he said, smiling as he spoke, you know, Louise, we ought to think about this a bit. Now stop it, Daddy. I refuse even to listen to you. Why, I've never heard anything so ridiculous in my life. No, seriously, my dear. Just wait a moment and hear what I have to say. But I don't want to hear it. Louise, please, it's like this. Richard here has offered us a serious bet. He is the one who wants to make it, not me. And if he loses, he will have to hand over a considerable amount of property. Now, wait a minute, my dear, don't interrupt. The point is this. He cannot possibly win. He seems to think he can. Now, listen to me, because I know what I'm talking about. The expert, when tasting a claret, so long as it is not one of the famous great wines like Lafite or Latour, can only get a certain way towards naming the vineyard. He can, of course, tell you the Bordeaux district from which the wine comes, whether it is from Saint-Emilion, Pomerol, Graves, or Medoux. But then each district has several communities, each one a little county, and each county has many, many small vineyards. It is impossible for a man to differentiate between them all by taste and smell alone. I don't mind telling you this. This is one that I've got here, which is from a small vineyard that is surrounded by many other small vineyards, and he'll never get it. It's impossible. You can't be sure of that, his daughter said. I'm telling you I can. Though I say it myself, I understand quite a bit about this wine business, you know. And anyway, heavens alive, girl, I'm your father, and you don't think I'd let you in for something that you didn't want, do you? I'm trying to make you some money. Mike, his wife said sharply. Stop it now, Mike, please. Again, he ignored her. If you will take this bet, he said to his daughter, in 10 minutes, you will be the owner of 2 large houses. But I don't want 2 large houses, Daddy. Then sell them. Sell them back to him on the spot. I'll arrange all that for you. And then just think of it, my dear. You'll be rich. You'll be independent for the rest of your life. Oh, Daddy, I don't like it. I think it's silly. So do I, the mother said. She jerked her hand briskly up and down as she spoke. She moved almost like a hen. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, Michael, ever suggesting such a thing. Your own daughter. Mike didn't even look at her. Take it, he said eagerly, staring hard at the girl. Take it, quick. I'll guarantee you won't lose. But I don't like it, Daddy. Come on, girl, take it. Mike was pushing her hard. He was leaning towards her, fixing her with two hard, bright eyes, and it was not easy for the daughter to resist him. But what if I lose? I keep telling you, you can't lose. I'll guarantee it. Oh, Daddy, must I? I'm making you a fortune, so come on now. What do you say, Louise? All right? For the last time, she hesitated. Then she gave a helpless little shrug of the shoulders and said, Oh, all right then. Just so long as you swear there's no danger of losing. Good, Mike cried. That's fine. Then it's a bet. Yes, Richard Pratt said, looking at the girl. It's a bet. Immediately, Mike picked up the wine, tipped the first thimbleful into his own glass, then skipped excitedly round the table, filling up the others. Now everyone was watching Richard Pratt, watching his face as he reached slowly for his glass with his right hand and lifted it to his nose. The man was about 50 years old, and he did not have a pleasant face. Somehow, it was all mouth and lips, the full, wet lips of the professional gourmet, the lower lip hanging downward in the center, a pendulous, permanently open taster's lip, shaped open to receive the rim of a glass or a morsel of food. Like a keyhole, I thought, watching it. His mouth is like a large, wet keyhole. Slowly he lifted the glass to his nose. The point of the nose entered the glass and moved over the surface of the wine, delicately sniffing. He swirled the wine gently around in the glass to receive the bouquet. His concentration was intense. He had closed his eyes, and now the whole top half of his body, the head and neck and chest, seemed to become a kind of huge, sensitive smelling machine, receiving, filtering, analyzing the message he was receiving through sniffing of his nose. Mike, I noticed, was lounging in his chair, apparently unconcerned, but he was watching every move. Mrs. Schofield, the wife, sat prim and upright at the other end of the table, looking straight ahead, her face tight with disapproval. The daughter, Louise, had shifted her chair away a little and sideways, facing the gourmet, and she, like her father, was watching closely. For at least a minute, the smelling process continued. Then, without opening his eyes or moving his head, Pratt lowered the glass to his mouth and sipped almost half the contents. He paused, his mouth full of wine, getting the first taste. Then he permitted some of it to trickle down his throat, and I saw his Adam's apple move as it passed by. But most of it he retained in his mouth. And now, without swallowing again, he drew in, through his lips, a thin breath of air, which mingled with the fumes of the wine in the mouth and passed on down into his lungs. He held the breath, blew it out through his nose, and finally began to roll the wine around under the tongue and chewed it, actually chewed it with his teeth, as though it were bread. It was a solemn, impressive performance, and I must say he did it well. He said, putting down the glass, running a pink tongue over his lips. Yes. A very interesting little wine, gentle and gracious, almost feminine in the aftertaste. There was an excess of saliva in his mouth, and as he spoke, he spat an occasional bright speck of it onto the table. Now we can start to eliminate, he said. You will pardon me for doing this carefully, but there is much at stake. Normally, I would perhaps take a bit of a chance, leaping forward quickly and landing right in the middle of the vineyard of my choice. But this time I must move cautiously. Yes, this time I must move cautiously, must I not? He looked up at Mike and he smiled, a thick-lipped, wet-lipped smile. And Mike did not smile back. First, then, which district in Bordeaux does this wine come from? This is not too difficult to guess. It is far too light in the body to be from either Saint-Emilion or Grave. It is obviously a Medoux. There is no doubt about that. Now, from which commune in Medoux does it come? That also, by elimination, should not be too difficult to decide. Margaux? No, it cannot be Margaux. It has not the violent bouquet of a Margaux. Pauillac? It cannot be Pauillac. No. It is too tender, too gentle and wistful to be a Pauillac. The wine of Pauillac has a character that is almost imperious in its taste, and also to me a Pauillac contains just a little pith, a curious, dusty, pithy flavor that the grape acquires from the soil of the district. No. This is a very gentle wine, demure and bashful in the first taste, emerging shyly, but quite graciously in the second. A little arch, perhaps, in the second taste, and a little naughty also, teasing the tongue with a trace, just a trace, of tannin. Then in the aftertaste, delightful, consoling, and feminine, with a certain blithely generous quality that one associates only with the wines of the commune of Saint-Julien. Unmistakably, this is a Saint-Julien. He leaned back in his chair, held his hands up level with his chest, and placed the fingertips carefully together. He was becoming ridiculously pompous, but I thought that some of it was deliberate, simply to mock his host. I found myself waiting rather tensely for him to go on. The girl, Louise, was lighting a cigarette. Pratt heard the match strike, and he turned on her, flaring suddenly with real anger. "Please," he said, "please, don't do that. It's a disgusting habit to smoke at table." She looked up at him, still holding the burning match in one hand, the big, slow eyes settling on his face, resting there a moment, moving away again, slow and contemptuous. She bent her head and blew out the match, but continued to hold the unlighted cigarette in her fingers. "I'm sorry, my dear," Pratt said, "but I simply cannot have smoking at table." She didn't look at him again. "Now, let me see. Where were we?" he said. "Ah, yes. This wine is from Bordeaux, from the commune of Saint-Julien, in the district of Medoux. So far, so good. But now we come to the more difficult part, the name of the vineyard itself. For in Saint-Julien there are many vineyards, and as our host so rightly remarked earlier on, there is often not much difference between the wine of one and the wine of the other. But we shall see." He paused again, closed his eyes. "I am trying to establish the growth," he said. "If I can do that, it will be half the battle. Now, let me see. This wine is obviously not from a first-growth vineyard, nor even a second. It is not a great wine. The quality, what do you call it? The radiance, the power is lacking. But a third growth, that it could be. And yet I doubt it. We know it is a good year. Our host has said so, and this is probably flattering a little bit. I must be careful. I must be very careful here." He picked up his glass and took another small sip. "Yes," he said, sucking his lips. "I was right. It is a fourth growth. Now I'm sure of it. A fourth growth, from a very good year. From a great year, in fact. And that's what made it taste for a moment like a third or even a second growth wine. Good. That's better. Now we're closing in. What of the fourth growth vineyards in the commune of Saint Julien? Again he paused, took up his glass, and held the rim against that sagging, pendulous lower lip of his. Then I saw the tongue shoot out, pink and narrow, the tip of it dipping into the wine, withdrawing swiftly again, a repulsive sight. When he lowered the glass, his eyes remained closed, the face concentrated, only the lips moving, sliding over each other like two pieces of wet, spongy rubber. There it is again, he cried. Tannin in the middle taste, and the quick astringent squeeze upon the tongue. Yes, of course. Now I have it. This wine comes from one of those small vineyards around Becherville. I remember now, the Becherville district, and the river, and the little harbor that has silted up so the wine ships can no longer use it. Becherville. Could it actually be a Becherville itself? Oh, no, I don't think so. Not quite. But it is somewhere very close. Chateau Talbot? Could it be a Talbot? Yes, it could. Wait one moment. He sipped the wine again, and out of the side of my eye, I noticed Mike Schofield and how he was leaning farther and farther forward over the table, his mouth slightly open, his small eyes fixed upon Richard Pratt. No, I was wrong. It was not a Talbot. A Talbot comes forward to you just a little quicker than this one. The fruit is nearer to the surface. If it is a 34, which I believe it is, then it couldn't be a Talbot. Well, let me think. It is not a Becherville, and it is not a Talbot, and yet it is so close to both of them, so close, that the vineyard must be almost in between. Now, which could that be? He hesitated, and we waited, watching his face. Everyone, even Mike's wife, was watching him now. I heard the maid put down the dish of vegetables on the sideboard behind me, gently, so as not to disturb the silence. Ah, he cried, I have it! Yes, I think I have it! For the first time, he sipped the wine, or for the last time, he sipped the wine. Then, still holding the glass up near his mouth, he turned to Mike, and he smiled, a slow, silky smile, and he said, You know what this is? This is the little Chateau Brener du Cru. Mike sat tight, not moving. And the year 1934. We all looked at Mike, waiting for him to turn the bottle round in its basket and show the label. Is that your final answer? Mike said. Yes, I think so. Well, is it or isn't it? Yes, it is. What was the name again? Chateau Brener du Cru. Pretty little vineyard. Lovely old chateau. Know it quite well. Can't think why I didn't recognize it at once. Come on, Daddy, the girl said. Turn it around and let's have a peek. I want my 2 houses. Just a minute, Mike said. Wait just a minute. He was sitting very quiet, bewildered looking, and his face was becoming puffy and pale, as though all the force was draining slowly out of him. Michael, his wife called sharply from the other end of the table. What's the matter? Keep out of this, Margaret. Will you please keep out? Richard Pratt was looking at Mike, smiling with his mouth. His eyes were small and bright. Mike was not looking at anyone. Daddy, the daughter cried, agonized. But Daddy, you don't mean to say he's guessed it right? Now stop worrying, my dear, Mike said. There's nothing to worry about. I think it was more to get away from his family than anything else that Mike then turned to Richard Pratt and said, I'll tell you what, Richard. I think you and I had better slip off into the next room and have a little chat. I don't want a little chat, Pratt said. All I want is to see the label on that bottle. He knew he was a winner now. He had the bearing, the quiet arrogance of a winner, and I could see that he was prepared to become thoroughly nasty if there was any trouble. What are you waiting for? He said to Mike. Go on and turn it around. Then this happened. The maid, the tiny, erect figure of the maid in her white and black uniform, was standing beside Richard Pratt, holding something out in her hand. I believe these are yours, sir, she said. Pratt glanced around, saw the pair of thin, horn-rimmed spectacles that she held out to him, and for a moment he hesitated. Are they? Oh, perhaps they are. I don't know. Yes, sir, they're yours. The maid was an elderly woman, nearer 70 than 60, a faithful family retainer of many years' standing. She put the spectacles down on the table beside him. Without thanking her, Pratt took them up and slipped them into his top pocket, behind the white handkerchief. But the maid didn't go away. She remained standing beside and slightly behind Richard Pratt, and there was something so unusual in her manner and in the way she stood there, small, motionless, and erect, that I, for one, found myself watching her with a sudden apprehension. Her old gray face had a frosty, determined look. The lips were compressed, the little chin was out, and the hands were clasped together tight before her. The curious cap on her head and the flash of white down the front of her uniform made her seem like some tiny, ruffled, white-breasted bird. You left them in Mr. Schofield's study, she said. Her voice was unnaturally, deliberately polite. On top of the green filing cabinet in his study, sir, when you happened to go in there by yourself, before dinner. It took a few moments for the full meaning of her words to penetrate, and in the silence that followed, I became aware of Mike and how he was slowly drawing himself up in his chair, and the color coming to his face, and the eyes opening wide, and the curl of his mouth, and the dangerous little patch of whiteness beginning to spread around the area of his nostrils. Now, Michael, his wife said. Keep calm now, Michael, dear. Keep calm. And that is the end of A Connoisseur's Revenge. The next story in this is The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe, which I love. We'll read that next week. We'll do that next week. Now, let me ask you this. I love the story. Did my count vote or did China steal my vote? Says Birdhouse. Well, I'll tell you what, Birdhouse. I don't know. What did you vote, Birdhouse? I'm not sure. I hope your vote counted, Birdhouse. But just let me know if I missed it. And I'll try to read some of the other stories as well. I'll read that six pager next week as well. We'll do 2. Maybe more than that. But I wanted to mention to you, you know what would have been a really cool ending to the story? And let me know if you anticipated this one. If the girl actually voted for E.F. Benson. Okay, so we'll go with E.F. Benson next week too. Okay, we'll do that. All right, thanks, Birdhouse. You got it, man. That's a good story by E.F. That's a great story, E.F. Benson. Yeah, LOL. He says, you got it. Yeah, absolutely. The Room in the Tower. That's a great story. It's almost surreal. That's all I'll say. But this story, The Connoisseur's Revenge, what would have been really cool is if the girl actually did want to marry the older dude. And she knew she couldn't get permission from her father. So she and what's his name? Was it Parker? Devised the whole scheme themselves. Pratt. She and Pratt devised the whole scheme and the bet that Pratt would lay the bet down. And she would look like she didn't want to marry him when in fact she did want to marry him. And that would let her go. And she'd still get the properties because she would be marrying Pratt. That'd be pretty freaking cool, wouldn't it? That'd be a great way to do the story. Now, some of you might recall a story from the Twilight Zone that pertained to a dude who was betting, I believe, in Vegas. And he had a lighter, a special lighter. And he bet these guys that the lighter could light. He said it never fails, this lighter. Never fails. And he bet this guy in this high stakes back room Vegas thing. And I've got a story that sort of plays on this that I want to write. He bet this guy that the lighter couldn't light 10 times in a row. Now, you probably remember that story, right? What's curious about that is the first time I had a real conversation with Richard Butler from the Psychedelic Furs was at the Paradise Rock Club in Boston on Comm Ave. I got to go back. My sister had a friend, Kathy, who worked for the record company. Kathy had asked my sister if she wanted to go back. She said, Gard, why don't you want to go back? I was like, sure, that'd be great. Thank you so much. So I got to hang out with the band. And I was sitting there at the Paradise, same area where we met Jazz Coleman and stuff like that. And I was upstairs, and they had the luncheon meats and stuff after the show. John Ashton was there. Tim Butler was there, that stuff. And Mars Williams, saxophonist, as they would say in England. And I was sitting at a table having some soda, and Richard Butler just sat down across from me. And this Richard Butler, right? And so a guy was trying to light this big silver Zippo lighter, and he couldn't make it light. And he's looking at it, and I'm looking at it, and he goes, you know what that reminds me of? I'm like, yeah, the Twilight Zone. He goes, you know that story? I'm like, yeah, I know that story, absolutely. He goes, you know who wrote that story? I'm like, yeah, Roald Dahl. He goes, you know that? I'm like, oh yeah, I love Roald Dahl stuff. He wrote all these adult stories. They were often in like Playboy magazine and stuff like that. Some of them were very off-color stories, right? He goes, oh, I love that story. And he says, I love Roald Dahl. So we started talking writers and stuff. He gave me a suggestion for a novel to read and things like that. And it was so much fun. We started talking about Iggy Pop and, how Iggy has this professional golfer's, what do you call that, handicap? Because he literally lived right on the back of a golf course. His mobile home, his family lived right on the back of a golf course. So we'd go out and play. And he's like, oh, yeah. He goes, and Richard said, I like golf too. And I was like, really? I would never have expected the guy, singing about slicing razor eyeballs with, razor blades, and cut his teeth with foul razor blades, and out of him comes foul white light from flowers, that, would be into this stuff. Because the first album, the second album are incredibly intense, and, writing, President Gas and all that stuff. And he goes, oh no, he goes, it's just this. He said, there's just something really pleasant about a beautifully manicured green and walking outside like that. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And of course, I didn't know he was a fine artist, an oil painter, and he lives in upstate New York now, out in the wilderness, So pretty cool stuff. Richard Butler, and we bonded on Roald Dahl. And if you haven't seen that story from Twilight Zone about the lighter, all I'll tell you is that the guy who wants to bet him says, I'll tell you what, if you can make that lighter light 10 times in a row, I'll give you something special. He goes, oh yeah? He goes, yeah. He goes, that Cadillac out there. And of course, back when that story was done, a big, it was super expensive, mega beautiful Cadillac, brand new. He goes, parked right out that door. So he says, well, what do I have to give you if it doesn't light 10 times in a row? He goes, your little finger. And he has like clippers or something. He'll clip it off right there. It's like, wow. So the whole story, and you probably are familiar with this. Remember this, you guys, if you've seen it, the whole half hour or the whole story, and whether it was Roald Dahl's Tales of the Unexpected or it was Alfred Hitchcock Presents or Twilight Zone, I can't remember, is literally every little thing that comes up as the guy goes to light it. And he's getting closer and closer to the 10, and he's like sweating, It's amazing. It's a great story. Great stuff. So we've got this. Birdhouse says, your backstory to a recalled memory is usually better than the short story. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. That's super cool. And Do Not Obey says soda. Yucky. I grew up on soda. It's so bad for us. And yeah, I might have been having something else. I don't know, like some orange juice or something like that. I didn't really drink a lot of soda in my life. So there you go. All right. So next week we'll check out the E.F. Benson story. I think you'll really enjoy that one. And I'll talk some more about short stories. I'll try to get some writing done on that story Transmitter, and we'll hang out again. It'll be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to that concert. Wish me luck. And again, you know, the way things are right now, I'm hoping to get some respite from what I've been experiencing. It has been crazy. And there, you know, a lot of great discoveries, but I was talking with the guy who was spraying outside the house to kill some stuff, and he's a good guy. And if you're watching, great to talk to you, dude. And I was like, yeah, you know, with this tinnitus stuff, it feels like somebody's put pencils and just drilling down my ear canals almost all the time. Equilibrium problems. You get up to go to the bathroom. I sort of like make sure that I'm close to the wall. You have to take all these tactical steps. And it's just an unbelievable challenge. And you feel crappy. So you can't give people the extra energy that you really want to give people. I can usually amp it up for certain things, which is why I do the show. I challenge myself. And Ferb will tell you, he called literally just seconds before we were going on, and it was bad. I was feeling rotten, but you guys get me lifted. It's cool. And so at the concert, if I can get there, if I can make it on the trip down to Mansfield, I'll get there. You know, there'll be a bathroom there. I'll be able to, I think I'll be able to do it. But even sometimes just lifting my arms, it's like you really got to force yourself. And if you're wondering why I'm saying this, and I've said it a few times this week, you know, a couple times a month, it is partially because I know that other people are experiencing stuff like this, and they understand that when you hear somebody saying, yeah, like literally just trying to lift my arms, like for a guy my age, of the people in my like class in high school, I was probably in the best shape of anybody. Like I was looking at my times running when I was, you know, 54, and I would have placed like 5th place for half 5K, like really good, you know. So I've been able to exercise and stay in okay shape. I make myself do it. And after you exercise, you get an adrenaline rush. So literally just before I did this show, I exercised, and I knew I was going to get that adrenaline pumping through my system, and it came through. It worked. Sometimes it's not quite right. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. And it is because I got whatever that COVID thing was, and whatever they did. And then before that, I had damage to my gut from Aspergillus mold toxins. So yeah, so you learn a lot. One of the things I'll mention to you is, and I'll show you, I've showed this guy before, the Mergogenomics channel on YouTube. Mergogenomics, the guy's up in Saskatchewan. He's a doctor originally from somewhere in Europe. He just did a short video on one of his hikes, and it got abbreviated. It was only 6 minutes. It should have been longer, but it just came out last night on the spike protein and the clots, the microclots that are appearing in long COVID people. There is a test that they can do for those microclots using ultraviolet light and something that sets it off under the light, a certain wavelength of light. He says literally it just shows up in the blood sample. You put it in and it'll show up, these microclots. So that's very interesting. And the microclots appear to, or the spike protein appears to have done damage to many people in the vagus nerve, which again, I was telling this man, Kevin, earlier today. Great. What a great guy. Just an awesome dude. Kevin, it was great to meet you today, man. And again, he lifted me up just chatting with him. But one of the things that I'll mention is a lot of the things that you hear in sort of esoteric fields of medicine, or you get suggested to you by people. When you're feeling bad, you can sometimes become closed to those things, and it's just people trying to do the best they can for somebody they care about, or they're curious and they say this, but you'll hear it a lot, so you get a little tired of it, you know. I try to make sure that I don't do that, and I'm open to the suggestions. And if I do have that initial reaction, I check it and I say, no, you know what, thanks, man, that's cool, appreciate that, you know. And what I've learned is a lot of these esoteric things about the spike protein are validated and they're tested. And stuff I heard about mitochondria being the basis for the energy for the cells. Like, I don't know about that. That's very oblique. I don't know about that. Sure enough, 100%, 100%. You get fatigue after exertion, all these different types of things. And as a person who suffers from this right now, one never possibly imagined that he would be conversing on these terms about himself. So it's always been very abstract. Now it's direct. It's in my life. And it's bad. And yeah, Harry Hart says, take NAC. Got it every day, man. Take NAC. In fact, I take augmented NAC that you can only get from Italy that Dr. LaGuardia suggested to me. It's about 3 times more expensive than regular NAC. And you have to take it in coordination with CoQ10 and NADH, plus arginine and special liposomal vitamin C and all these things. And plus low-dose naltrexone, plus the vagus nerve stimulator that I got, plus red light therapy, plus occasionally trying methylene blue, occasionally, and DMSO. And I'm learning a lot more about DMSO in combination with things like aloe vera, black seed oil, and other things. So we'll see what happens. But I was already getting the headaches before I got the long COVID thing. I would be down, with terrible, terrible headaches and the digestive stuff. It's just that they've increased in frequency now. And I'm getting another area of headaches the past few months in my right side, which is what was getting me today. Anyway, I'll just end it there. But just to mention, remember Roald Dahl's story? Roald Dahl got shot down when he was in the RAF. He had to recoup for months in the hospital. And if he had not recouped for months in the hospital, he wouldn't have done the interview with the guy who wrote the Hornblower novels and actually put it out in the hospital publication. And then C.S. Forrester approached him and said, wow, you're a really good writer. You should be a professional writer. And he took him up on it. And don't forget, Roald Dahl nursed his wife back after a stroke. And that's being Patricia Neal, an American woman. And I guess he was quite an amazing guy. So we've got this. Hope you get to go say hi to your brother, Peter, older sis, and niece from the LC chat room. You got it, Birdhouse. Thanks, man. All right, everybody. I'm going to leave you. I'm going to get some food and hopefully keep it down well. And I'm going to leave you with a little something from the Outer Limits outro, and that will be the ending for now. It's going to be our Outer Limits control voice saying fairly well. Remember, if you want to support the show, that's key. If you want to ask people to support the show, that's also key. You can do it over at the Substack. More subscribers over there. We'll get that stuff out to you. It'll be great. And, of course, remember the former Star Trek Writing Fellow channel. Spread the word. And if you want to donate, if I've missed any donations, we'll talk to you next week. Just remind me. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. I'll leave you with the control voice.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to the Outer Limits.